Anything else on that item? Next item, no email to administration. Okay.
Well, I brought this up under committee report. This is becoming a cumbersome policy that I have 100% followed, and it makes more work. It makes no sense. And frankly, it just kind of deters me from being involved in any other committees because it requires me to make phone calls to Kathy Richards. I had to read email addresses to her on the phone that normally would have been just a copy-paste return and done. It just adds time to my schedule, which is totally unnecessary. And I think that it should be removed. And if it's not removed, we are going to have to set up some policy because our policies cannot just exist in the votes of our minutes. We cannot just say to a new school board member, you cannot email the administration, go back and look at the minutes of a certain meeting. We're going to have to create a policy to uphold this. But short of doing that, I think it's time that we recognize that we are in the 21st century and we all have a lot to do, and that we remove this.
If I could, or I was the one who made the motion, I agree with you. I agree. It's creating work for you on that assessment committee, and I can tell you I would be willing to revisit that issue, and I'll tell you why. The intent and the intent of the motion that I made that was seconded and approved was to keep the business of this board in the public venue. It was not to keep you from trying to schedule a meeting, and I don't know, I can't say for sure, but I thought that was discussed at the meeting, that if somebody's asking for, hey, what time is that meeting, there's an email that goes out. But you know what, I agree with you. So I mean, if we can keep the business of this board, and I'll say, and that's a very vague term, but the business of the board, where we're not deliberating, we're not asking for interpretations of the administration, and I know I can't think of every scenario, but if we can keep it to, I'll say, the board business is done at board meetings, and then you know, open it up to the administration. And I look at the superintendent when I say that, because we do have a policy that states that our correspondence is with the superintendent, that was developed in October of 1999. So I would be more than willing to revisit the issue. So Tricia, I think you had your hand up first.
David mentioned that to have a policy regarding, like, because we made a vote that there's no email to administration, he suggested that we have a policy. Should this go back to the policy committee and have it laid out what is and isn't email acceptable? I mean, I can imagine that it would be difficult if you were trying to schedule a meeting with somebody and you couldn't email them, so maybe there's guidelines. And if everything else we do is in our policy manual, maybe that needs to be.
Dave?
Mr. Argo, have you ever talked on the phone to Superintendent Littlefield?
Probably.
I have. I've spoken with him privately. None of that's public record. Yet if I email Dr. Littlefield, it becomes public record. So I would argue that this change has made us more untransparent, because now if I call up Dr. Littlefield and I ask him or discuss some question, the public doesn't have the benefit of that conversation because it's not discoverable under right to know. So to say that this is making us do more business at the board isn't true, unless you're going to go and restrict personal contact or certainly phone conversation. I don't have to divulge my conversation with Dr. Littlefield, but if I email him, the law states that that's public record. So I think that having these things, whether you find them to be objectionable questions or not, the public can decide for themselves. But if it's done in a phone call, nobody's gonna know.
Well, knowing the superintendent as I do, I believe he would probably state that the discussion should be in public session. So, again, I'm not trying to hinder the board. I made some points on my reason for doing that, and but I also stated that I'd be willing to revisit it. So, if it's the will of the board to revisit it and change that policy, then so be it. Mike?
I'd like to make a motion, please, that we reconsider the motion to send no emails to administrators and to rescind that motion at this time.
Unfortunately, I don't think Mike can do that because you voted in the negative for that motion. I think we need someone in the affirmative to for reconsideration.
No, I wasn't here.
I'd like you to make the motion, but I think under the rules, someone that voted in the affirmative has to vote for reconsideration.
Okay. You could always make a motion to change the policy.
I rescind, forget my motion, I take it back.
Okay?
Mr. Argo, you made the motion, now why don't you make the motion to rescind it?
Do that.
You can make a
I'm
motion not to
asking-
rescind, but to reconsider, is probably what you
Right.
want to reconsider and then
I'm
vote
sorry,
on it.
reconsider.
I was asking the board what their pleasure was. Yes, that is an option. Cheryl?
I'd like to explore, I know the town has, I think it's in the town charter, how it's referenced to how business is conducted by the town council with the staff. I'm not familiar with it, but I would like to view that, and maybe that would help us correct any of these issues that we're having. But in the meantime, it's probably a good idea to lift this at least to allow logistic emails to go back and forth for meetings in that of that nature.
Yeah. I can tell you this, as a sitting school board member, I am not going to partake in any description of what is allowable and what is not allowable, some kind of a list like that. I'm an adult, I'm an elected official, and I think I can email someone and have an email conversation with someone. And if that's going to be the restriction, then I will stay with the phone call.
Well, I think if someone, someone should talk about reconsidering that motion. But I think if someone is abusing their privilege in that email, then they could be dealt with, themselves, and not have to close everybody off from doing that. And so I'm sure we have some kind of policy of abuse of our privileges as a school board member that could be used if someone does abuse that privilege.
I think if we've already seen, Mike, the arbiter of that abuse lies here for the majority of this board. And I am not going to go back down the road we've already been at and ask a question and be accused of harassment. We're going to, I'll either use email or I won't. But to have this, if I send something and it's unpopular with this board, that we're going to have a discussion about it and we're going to vote to stop me, no, thank you.
So if I, oh, sorry. Yeah.
If you have something, I was gonna say something, but I gotta get the cough down first.
I think I'm gonna take the cat out of the bag. David, this is a specific question to you. Why is it that if you came back to the board and said you had a problem with the no email to administration, and you provided a logistical evidence that it was hindering you being on a certain committee, that you couldn't email the superintendent? And instead of having a discussion about, okay, maybe there are parameters to our original vote that we need to look at that we didn't consider, or that Dana didn't consider when he made the motion, that logistically, if you were on a committee with the superintendent, you couldn't email him because it says no email to administration. And instead of trying to work through the logistics of it, you say, it's my way or I'm not doing it. I don't understand.
This is partially because you're trying to put more restrictions on me than you are the BYOD program. I am an adult, I'm an elected official. If I were to email the Superintendent Littlefield and say
It's
something
Dr. Littlefield.
please don't correct me, Mr.
Well,
Sparks. He is the
on an
superintendent of
educational
schools.
matter, I am going to correct you. He has a PhD in education, and you always address him as Dr. Littlefield, unless he gives you permission to do otherwise.
Mrs. Corcus, if I were to email Superintendent Littlefield and say something to him that he felt was inappropriate, one, he could not answer my email. Two, he could talk to me about that personally. I am an adult, he's an adult. That's not a problem. I'm not going to go back and weave through some list of things that, we can't talk about. We can't talk about non-public issues, and we can't deliberate, and that's stated in the law. But I'm not going to agree to be able to email only for meeting dates and not ask a question that's pertinent to my duty on this board.
Well, that's a shame, because Cheryl brought an excellent example to the table of what the town council does, and maybe we should go look at how the guidelines that are given to town councilors on how they approach employees as a way to navigate through no email and keeping everything out in the public. You say you want everything in the public, so then we say no emails asking questions so that the public is aware of the questions that are being asked behind the scenes, and someone brings something up and it's not the way you think it should be, so you don't want to do it. I just don't understand not wanting to collaborate and come up with an idea, come up with different ways to keep everything in the public, but not hinder the job we do as school board members. I just don't understand.
Every email that I have sent since I have been on this board has been made available to the public through the Right to Know Act. So anyone having any question about those emails can read them in their responses. So I don't think that you can construct some rules that are going to hamper that. If you have questions about the town councilor, I suggest we recognize the town councilor that's sitting right here and ask him directly. I'm sure he uses email in his duties as town councilor. I'm willing to recognize Mr. Lazat.
Tricia, do you have anything else? All right. I am willing to, and Leanne, you can help me with the wording, because I've never done this, so I'm willing to revisit, rescind, reconsider, whatever. But I would like to, as part of it, talk about, policy BHC, which was adopted by the board in October of 1999. It says the contact to employees is through the superintendent, which means if I have a question of anyone in the school district, I am to address the superintendent, and the superintendent gets the response. Whether the superintendent answers the question or asks for assistance with the answer, solely up to him. But all questions go through the superintendent. One issue that I had, with one of the reasons that I made the motion that I did, is that I've got some numbers, and I could say that to.
Excuse me, is this part of the motion?
Yeah, can we, Can we just
I
take this
don't-
one at a time?
I did not make a motion.
Oh.
I was talking before I did it. I said I'd
Okay.
be willing to reconsider,
Okay.
whatever,
Okay, I had it as a motion.
but I have not made a motion.
All right.
The point I was making is that if we're going to have this, we've got to make sure that we're adhering to existing policies, which state that we go through the superintendent. Now, the superintendent has every right to either defer or wait until a board meeting before he responds. So, but you know, I agree with you. I do not want to hinder what you're doing with the assessment committee or any other committee. So, but what I was saying that, you know, I've got numbers here of, you know, 36 emails that have gone to Director of Technology since you've been on the board. And I believe those were part of Right to Know.
Excuse me,
So-
how many of those are duplicates?
Excuse me. And the fact, whether there were 36, 3, or what have you, the policy is very clear that you go through the superintendent. So I'm just making points that we've got to make sure we as a board adhere to this policy. So again, I am willing to make a motion, and now I will make that motion to reconsider the motion from, you're gonna have to help me here,
You
folks.
consider the vote taken, I believe it was on July? Was it in July?
11.
Or last month?
Was that the July 11th?
July 11.
Vote on July 11th
Yes.
to
Um,
restrict
To restrict
Email.
emails from school board to administration. Administration being superintendent.
Okay, so you want to reconsider?
That's the motion, correct?
Correct.
Second, or am I not allowed to do that?
You're not allowed to do that, because you weren't even part of that.
Second.
Was that Cheryl?
Yes. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of approving that motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay, so now all you've done is voted to reconsider it. You haven't rescinded it. You understand that, right?
No, I didn't, but thank you.
Okay. So all you've done is said you're bringing it back up and you want to reconsider it, so now you can re-vote on it.
Well, I guess point of order, is it up to me?
No.
It could be anyone.
Right.
I'd like to make a motion that we rescind the vote that was made to restrict email to administration on July 11th.
Second.
Discussion. Dave?
I would point out that when this motion was originally made, I was clarifying with Dr. Littlefield the exact points that you're making now. And that's where that discussion started, when I was asking Dr. Littlefield what expectations we had about sending emails. And I think I don't want to say what he was about to say, but I'm sure he is aware of the policy. And in fact, I have emailed one of the principals of the school and got a response from Dr. Littlefield. Now, that's fine. So I think that had we just continued that discussion, that would have all come out.
Anyone else?
Can I just point of order on it? I believe what you really need to do is you've reconsidered the vote, so you need to re-vote on the original motions, which you're going to do, and you can either pass that, you're reconsidering the vote. You're not, because you can't make another motion on top of the
Yeah,
Okay,
motion.
Rescind it, right.
so, just, all right.
So you're just
Yeah.
reconsidering your position on the original motion. You can't like rescind the motion.
So it's the original motion that we're now voting on?
Right, so now
Thank
you've
you.
reconsidered it. you can talk about it, and then you vote again on the original motion. Now
Right,
you can
right, so I withdraw my
vote-
motion.
Right, vote to, I think what you wanna do is vote it down, and then if you wanna make a new motion with, you can do
Understood,
that,
yeah,
okay?
understood.
Okay, so you're just gonna withdraw, I'm just gonna take that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any discussion on
The original
the
motion.
original motion?
Can I go this time?
I don't believe you can.
Why, I don't, you sure?
I have to look it up.
Yeah, please, if you could.
I disagree with everybody. Robert's Rules is not the law. The Robert's Rules, police don't visit us. I believe that this is a motion from the outset to rescind. A motion to rescind changes a decision. That's the definition of Robert's Rules. It requires a second. It is amendable. It's debatable. It can, in and of itself, be reconsidered. And it takes a 2/3 vote. It changes the decision. So I would erase everything from my memory banks. I'll email that to all of you. And I would rescind the action that prohibited emails to administration. Bang, 2/3 vote. And it's not like reconsideration where you had to be part of the prevailing side.
Well, point of order, what we've just done,
I wouldn't have done that.
well, I understand that. But we're on the record as doing this.
Well,
I gotta tell you, this is
Another
uncharted
fine
territory for me, yeah, so.
then, you know, well, I don't think that you can undo an action taken. Before a vote, you can withdraw a second, you can withdraw a motion.
Because we voted to reconsider. And now we're at a point,
Then,
well, the question was, if we're
okay.
voting on the original motion, can Mike vote?
Yes, I would vote now. You voted to reconsider, which I think was unnecessary. You're now going to vote to rescind. You're reconsidering, you're revisiting that prohibition on emails. Rescind the prohibition on emails. 2/3 vote.
So we're not just voting on the original motion, we're voting to rescind it.
You're rescinding it, yeah.
Why not just vote down the original motion? Go right back where we started.
I just wanna do it right.
We can under reconsideration.
You reconsider, you take the vote, you vote it down. That's how we do it in the town council. You don't,
Like you said.
in the,
Is that what you said?
I believe that they can certainly do business the way they do business. I've never seen it done that way, but I've always seen it done as a rescission, rescinding the vote. And there's no prohibition against being on the prevailing side. It doesn't matter. You just want to get the emails back.
I'm gonna vote, yeah. Okay, so what do we?
The superintendent's recommendation is rescind the action. Rescind the action prohibiting.
I'll make a motion that we rescind the action prohibiting emails.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion. All in favor of approving that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else on email to administration?